Yeah, so I know that you do some work with like consent and survivor justice, and I was wondering if you could talk about like how that kind of work that you do has influenced like the way that you personally communicate.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I'm definitely not an expert on all of this, I'm just someone who is interested in it and is trying to learn more, is that like consent and communication, navigating power and boundaries are things that are so part of like navigating sexual experiences and relationships, and that those skills are also something that completely like influence everything else in your life, and that like the skills, while they're heightened in sexual relationships because sometimes the boundary crossing has much like worse consequences, but I think like if you learn how to communicate, like how to set like a small boundary, this one thing that you do, like I really don't like it or it makes me uncomfortable, or and this is what I actually really like to do. I think that's something that is a skill that we can use in our sexual relationships, and it is also a skill that we can use in our working relationships, about like what tasks and stuff that do we like to take on and what do we not like to take on, and what are we uncomfortable taking on but it's still okay if you need to, kind of that kind of in between zone of yeah, and so I think that's one thing, is that like if we're teaching people, I think it's like a problem in our society around how we talk about sex, and it's also a problem in our society how we talk about like actually communicating with each other in our relationships, and that like hopefully as we're addressing it on both those scales, they'll help each other, as we're all just learning like how to communicate our boundaries, be vulnerable, and also be upfront, and like learn how to accept no's and learn how to say no. Um, but I'll give an example, like in on the survivor justice team that I'm helping coordinate as part of the Sunrise movement. Um, we talk about, consent, of course, and we talk about boundaries and being really explicit about, what we like, what we don't want to do. Um, and that's something that we talk about in the context of like sex and relationships. However, I've realized that I was specifically like kind of biting off a little more than I could chew, and feeling really overwhelmed as a coordinator of that team. So I was able to use the skills that we were talking about and how we use our in our sexual relationships. I was able to use that skill and really set a boundary with the team in my work as a coordinator, and say, "Hi, like this is something that is actually, this work isn't like the work of holding the, listing of the things that I didn't want to do is actually not really working for me. This is the work that I really want to be doing. I'm wondering if anyone else can take on, these pieces, and I'm going to set a boundary that I'm going to work on this thing and not that." And so I think that is something that like modeling, setting boundaries, being communicative, and um, saying what we like and don't like, something that we can do in our everything, and we can do it when with intimate partners. Um, yeah, which has been really, really cool. And I also do think that like the communication and consent around sexual and intimate experiences, interactions, is like does need its own specific individual attention, because it does have like really serious implications when boundaries are broken.